It's the year 2024. There is tons of data on the internet. There are tons of speakers. There are tons of YouTube videos. Everyone has opinions. Everyone is saying everything and anything all over the place. Dr. McDougall, you have real world experience. You've been doing this for 50 years. You've been in African countries where you were the only doctor treating 1,500 people. You have an incredible background. You've written books. You have people seeing you. So the question I'd like to ask you is, what happened? What happened to all the people who ate the whole food plant-based diet? Did they all get rid of diabetes? Did they all lose weight? Do some people still get heart attacks? Do some people still get cancer and die? Like, what is the actual result if someone says, I went to the conference, I changed my diet, I exercise, I sleep, I do everything you tell me. Do we live to 115? Like, what should we expect if we do this?
No, you won't live to be 115. The lifespan of a human being is 85 years. We published data in 3 studies that looks at our results over 7 days and also over a year-long period of time. So we have data. The average weight loss in 7 days is over 3 pounds, eating as much as you want, as often as you want. Average drop in cholesterol is 22 points. Nearly 90% of people are able to get off their medications, particularly blood pressure and diabetic medications. We reduce fatigue, lower insulin levels, lower all your risk factors, get people moving again. So, you know, we have data to substantiate what happens. You ask, Steve, why everybody's confused. Well, it has to do with several things, and I'll just mention a couple of them. The main one is money. Okay, it all comes back to money. Secondarily are people's egos. And the third thing is people can't see past their own dinner plate. That's some of the problems. There are a lot more out there too. But I think if you focus on money, you've pretty much got the answer to the problems and the solutions. So anyway. And I just want to mention, I learned my really rural practice of medicine out in the country on the big island of Hawaii. And I took care of 5,000 people over a period of 3 years. That was back when I was a real doctor. I used to push drugs. But these days, I've cared for over 12,000 people. As you mentioned, I've been at this for over half a century. And you know something, Steve? I'm the luckiest doctor in the world because my patients get well. It used to be my patients got drugged and got a bunch of excuses. That's basically it. But my patients get well. Why do they get well? Because we deal with the problem. What's the problem? It's the food. What's the correct diet for people? All you have to do is look at science and history and geography, and you can figure this out. Or you can look at your religious teachings. I don't care where you look. It all comes out to the same answer. The human being is a starch eater, a starchivore, a starchitarian. Essentially, well, all large, successful populations of people through all of verifiable human history have obtained the bulk of their calories from starch, like the Native American, potatoes and corn. Central America, the Aztecs and Mayans were known as the people of the corn. South America, the Incans were potato eaters. In the Middle East is known as the breadbasket of the world. Bread, not pork chops, the breadbasket of the world. And you can all relate to the Far East and their diet of 90% rice. Starch is the key for you getting control. Not plants, not vegetarian, not vegetables, although the diet we teach is pure vegan and low fat. You have to focus on these elements of rice, corn, potatoes, breads, pastas, etc., and then you get control. Otherwise, you're lost and sick and suffering.
Thank you. Dr. Helman, you also have had a lot of experience with real world people. You've worked at True North. You've worked at Hippocrates Health Institute. You do a lot of research to find what evidence-based answers. What have you found the results of people? What has happened from doing all the things you're saying to do?
Yeah, so it's really exciting that in my experience, which unfortunately isn't 50 years like Dr. McDougall, but in I would say 10 or 20 years, I have seen numerous chronic diseases reverse using plants, using a plant-based diet. And, whether that's, and I'm also a big fan of fasting when it's appropriate. So the good news is that there are other options than the traditional system that's being offered by American medicine. And but let's just be clear, this is a different paradigm. The paradigm that most people in this country have are you wait until you have a chronic disease, and then, and only then, do you start investigating and trying to reverse it, as opposed to being aware that there are many things you can do to prevent these chronic diseases like high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, etc. And if you take action early, you can prevent these diseases.
Okay. According to Michael Greger's research, consumption of nuts is associated with reduced risk of premature death, making them an essential component of a diet aimed at promoting longevity. Dr. Greger highlights walnuts in particular for their omega-3 content and potential in improving artery function. Do you agree? And what are the health effects of a diet high in plant fats like raw seeds, raw nuts, avocados, and olives? What are the pros and cons? But both of you with this question.
Okay. Should I go
Go ahead.
first? All right.
Sure. Why not?
So my perspective is it depends. It depends on the patient, but in general, yeah, I'm a big fan of walnuts and other nuts and seeds. But the problem I found for myself and my patients is that they can become addictive, as in the correct dose for many people is going to be a handful, 1 ounce of walnuts or something like that. Whereas I don't know about you, but if you put a big bowl of walnuts in front of me, it's hard for me to stop at just 1 ounce. But let me be clear. There are some of my patients that I've seen who actually have the problem of not being overweight, but are underweight. And in which case, they need more calories, and it's reasonable to take more than 1 ounce. But let me give you another example. It's not just walnuts, it's other. I saw at Hippocrates, on avocado night, people would pile 3 avocados on their plate, and that would be their meal, and they would not lose as much weight as when, if they only took, an eighth or a quarter of an avocado. So in general, I agree that walnuts have important omega-3s and other nutrients, but for most people, you have to focus on moderation, which would be, an ounce. So that's my perspective.
Well, I'm one of your, or I could be one of your patients that needs to add nuts to their diet. And I do. I eat, well, I probably eat some days 800 calories of nuts trying to gain weight, but it doesn't work with me. I no matter how many nuts I seem to eat, it doesn't work. First thing I would like to say is that nuts and seeds and avocados are not unhealthy. They're generally healthy, but the problem is they're 90% fat and they're loaded with calories. So, as mentioned, some people have a hard time and they gain weight. I happen to be probably one of the exceptions. The other thing you need to understand is you don't ever have to eat a nut or a seed or an avocado. There's plenty of omega-3 fats in all your vegetable foods. There's never been a case of omega-3 fatty acid deficiency ever described in science or in history based on diet. It's never happened. The only time you've had fatty acid deficiency is in the extremes. People who've had horrible accidents and they've lost their intestinal tract and they can't absorb fat. Or people who have terrible illnesses like Crohn's disease. In that case, yeah, but otherwise, no diet would fail you. You'll always get enough omega-3 fats on any natural diet. So, for those who are guilted into, they need to get their omega-3s, stop it. It isn't necessary, and it may lead you to an excess amount of body fat that you don't desire. So we consider nuts a delicacy in our program.
Is there, if you were giving advice to someone on how to prevent Alzheimer's, what would you say?
Wow, where to start? I would talk about maybe 5 different categories, making sure that not only that people eat the right diet, specifically avoiding animal products and eating plants, but I would also focus on things like making sure they get adequate exercise, that they decrease their stress levels. And what has come out of the data, the recent data I've seen, is that the number one risk factor for the development of Alzheimer's is actually poor sleep, specifically deep sleep. So in connection, for whatever reason, having good connection with friends, family, and others seems to be protective for Alzheimer's. I mean, we could talk for hours on this topic, but I think the important topic is that, or point is that, fortunately, Alzheimer's is preventable despite what you may have heard from the traditional media or narrative currently about Alzheimer's. And I know we were talking beforehand, Dr. McDougall and myself, that, I mean, he's written papers, et cetera, about aluminum, unfortunately being one of the causes or the cause of Alzheimer's. So obviously, that being true, you want to limit your exposure to aluminum.
Well, I think first you have to realize the medical business is not going to save you. Their new drugs are extremely expensive, costing $26,000 to $52,000 a year. They're extremely ineffective, and they're extremely toxic. In fact, they're a great controversy in the medical business. And, the fact that they came to the marketplace is a bit surprising, because if doctors and scientists were being honest, they'd have never let it happen. But it's a business issue. Alzheimer's, in part, is due to the Western diet. But, that's only a part of the factor. What happens when you eat the Western diet is you're eating an acidic diet. And that acid nature that's created in the blood and in the bowel makes aluminum more absorbable by the human intestine. If you look at Alzheimer's disease, it's diagnosed, it was first diagnosed in 1903 by Louis Alzheimer, who found a lady with rapidly progressive dementia. And he looked at her brain under a regular microscope, and he found this characteristic plaque called a senile plaque. And then over the next 20 years, there were 33 cases of Alzheimer's. And then World War II came along, and we started using aluminum in everything. It became a readily available metal. And then it got into the millions, where they predict tens of millions of people will get Alzheimer's in the upcoming years. Let's get back to that plaque that Louis Alzheimer discovered in 1903. When you look at that plaque carefully, under a microscope, what you find is that you must see this plaque to diagnose Alzheimer's. It's called a pathognomonic lesion. If you don't have the plaque, you don't have Alzheimer's. And when you carefully look at these plaques, like with an electron microscope, you delve inside of them, you find that they all have a central core of aluminum silicate. You don't have the plaque without the aluminum. You don't have Alzheimer's without the plaque. We also have research that was published in the 80s where aluminum chelating agent called deferoxamine, when they gave people shots of deferoxamine for 2 years, they ended up reducing their progression of disease in half compared to a control group. They did twice as well, those that got the shots. Now, the problem with the shots, deferoxamine, you can look up on Amazon or on Google. It's available, but it's pennies. I just told you these medications cost $26,000 to $52,000 a year. I've written 2 articles in the last 6 months, one to the New England Journal of Medicine, one to JAMA. When they came out with articles on drugs like Leqembi, which is one of these monoclonal antibody drugs, which is being hit in the press all the time, published a couple of articles, and I wrote them and asked them. I gave them the evidence on aluminum poisoning and Alzheimer's, just the stuff I just told you. And I asked them, why don't you at least study this? I mean, you're willing to study drugs that cause brain bleeding and swelling in 20% of the people. They're highly toxic. A third of the people have to quit the drugs. They can't take them. They get so sick. I said, look, why don't you at least study aluminum chelators? Because it does no harm. It costs nothing. And it is a cure, because if you believe Alzheimer's is caused by aluminum, you've cured the patient by relieving of the causative agent. Anyways, both times I've got rejected, but I'm going to keep trying. I'll keep sending them letters. But anyways, it's due to aluminum poisoning. That's what it's due to. And the Western diet has an influence too.
Dr. Eric Berg, a health educator with a significant online presence of 11 million YouTube followers, extols the benefits of eggs, citing their high-quality protein for muscle building, choline for brain and liver health, lecithin for heart health, vital vitamins like K2, D, E, and A for various health benefits, omega-3 fatty acids from free-range chickens for cardiovascular and cognitive health, essential B vitamins for energy, various minerals for bodily functions, and carotenoids like lutein and zeaxanthin for eye health. Conversely, Mark Hyman, referencing U.S. dietary guidelines, deems the cholesterol concern in eggs outdated, clarifying it doesn't significantly affect blood cholesterol or heart disease risk. He distinguishes dietary choline in eggs from supplements, emphasizing its importance for health and cautioning against confusion. Hyman also addresses how gut bacteria convert choline to TMAO, a heart disease-linked metabolite, suggesting a healthy gut microbiome can counteract this. He recommends a fiber-rich diet, probiotics, and prebiotics to maintain a healthy gut rather than avoiding choline-rich food like eggs. Given these points, do you advocate for including eggs in our diet?
Was this Mark Hyman you were talking about?
Eric Berg is a YouTube doctor with 11 million followers, and Mark Hyman is an author.
Well, you only have to wait a couple of weeks, and Mark Hyman will change his mind. He'll start preaching something else. So it's no problem, folks. Believe what you want to believe. Look, an egg is the most nutrient dense of all foods. I mean, think about it. In this package, a shell, you have all the components to grow feathers, beaks, intestines, feet. You build a whole little chicken of all that you need in ingredients is in this one shelled ovum egg. This has a tremendous amount of nutrients, but the problem with people in our society is not a problem of not getting enough nutrients. It's a problem of overnutrition. And the egg is the ultimate in overnutrition. So the data, they quote data, which is highly cherry-picked. The data that's done by old and new researchers clearly shows that egg consumption will raise your cholesterol and increase your risk of dying of heart disease, clearly. And I know the tricks that the researchers that work for the egg industry use to make it seem like it doesn't happen. I'll tell you the two tricks if you want them. One thing they do is they saturate the gut of their subjects with cholesterol from other sources. And then you feed an egg to somebody. Once you saturate the sites in the intestine with cholesterol from other sources, then the cholesterol doesn't go up from eggs. The other thing they do is they don't measure the curve of cholesterol rise that happens in 24 hours. It's this accelerated rise in cholesterol that causes the atherosclerosis. And by the end of the day, the curve has reached back down to the level it started at. So if you're going to check the blood cholesterol in the morning every day, you're going to miss the curve of elevated blood cholesterol that damages the arteries. That's how they fool you. I know their tricks. Anyway, don't look. At most, eggs are for Easter. And I think you could probably do just as well hiding potatoes.
I agree 100%. And then On top of that, here's some other problems with eggs. One
Salmonella.
salmonella infection. And on top of that, you've got what's called endotoxin, which is infection, bacterial cell walls. Actually, this endotoxin and frankly, other toxins like to hang out in the fatty part of eggs. So it turns out that the higher you go in the food chain, whether on land or sea, you get higher and higher level of these fatty toxins like PCBs and forever toxins. So if you're eating food that's coming from an animal, you're getting a much higher dose of these petrochemicals and other fatty toxins, in addition to the downsides that Dr. McDougall mentioned about the cholesterol piece. So eggs are not a health food. I would avoid them.
Okay, one more thing I got to add about eggs. What is the most odoriferous, stinky smell that we perceive? It's rotten eggs. You're smelling the sulfur. Eggs are extremely high in sulfur. And when you eat high sulfur foods, that stink comes out in your body as bad breath, body odor, and stinky farts. You smell as a consequence of the sulfur you eat. And eggs are the highest of any sulfur content of any common food that we consume. Sulfur sets you up for diseases like ulcerative colitis. It's toxic. Hydrogen sulfide's toxic to the intestinal tract. It causes excessive bone loss because of its acidity. Sulfur-containing amino acids, methionine and cysteine, break down to sulfuric acid. You've got to neutralize that acid, which robs your bones of bone material. You get osteoporosis and kidney stones. Hey, that's about as distorted as you can get. But we live in a world where the extremes get attention. They'll tell you you should eat kangaroo placentas. That'll do it. Let's recommend kangaroo placentas for the population. They'll buy it. Why not? Especially if you have to pay a lot for it. God, people are so gullible. And they can see this. This is not something that they're blind to. You just open your eyes. Most of you have been alive long enough, or you've seen enough of the world to realize still people who live predominantly on starches, like the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Thailand people, they're trim, healthy, hearty, active. And when people in these particular countries like Korea, they become rich like politicians in Korea, what do they look like?
Okay.
Americans. You got it. That's right, Americans.
Okay.
I'm not mentioning any politicians' names, but you know who I'm talking about.
Dr. Michael Greger highlights the risks of high sodium intake on mortality, advocating for reduced salt consumption to enhance longevity. In contrast, James Nicolatonio, author of The Salt Fix and The Mineral Fix, attributes improved exercise capacity and health not to low salt intake, but to balanced mineral consumption and reducing refined sugars. He argues that deficiencies in minerals like potassium and magnesium, coupled with high sugar intake, are the real culprits behind the health issues often blamed on salt. Nicolatonio suggests that our natural inclination for salt, unlike the modern tendency towards refined sugar, indicates its essential role in our diet, potentially affecting our brain's reward system and sugar cravings. He emphasizes the importance of minerals, including magnesium, for overall health and performance. Given these perspectives, what does your research indicate about the relationship between salt intake and health?
Well, I'd like Dr. Helman to lead the way, because
yes, sure.
sometimes
This
I
is
get carried away in my answers.
this is a complicated question with lots of nuances. So let me just start with some definitions. So when people talk about salt, often what they mean is table salt, which is sodium chloride. And if we focus just for a second there, it is true. I agree with Dr. Greger that the average American has way too much sodium in their diet from processed foods, etc. And we know now from the research that if your sodium intake, your sodium level is too high, you will get high blood pressure, often because of damage to your blood vessels. So that's piece number one. The other nuance to your question was about other salts, cations, specifically magnesium and potassium, which it is true that most Americans are deficient in magnesium and potassium. And where do you get normally magnesium and potassium? You get it from plants. So if we could get the average American to eat more plants, we could get the deficiencies of magnesium and potassium improved. Now, are there a very, very small subset of people that need to replace, that actually their sodium levels are too low because they're ultra athletes that are out, exercising and sweating for 3 hours, in a row? Yes, some ultra athletes may need to take some extra sodium, but that is like 1% of the population. Whereas if you see what gets marketed to the general public, it's sports drinks like Gatorade with high levels of sugar and sodium, which are not good. So to simplify, I number one, you should avoid adding salt or sodium to your diet. Number two, you should make sure you're getting enough potassium and magnesium. And it's confusing because all three of those could be called salt. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Shall I go?
Yes.
Okay. It's the pig, not the bacon. Okay, the reason salt is the major problem is because of the company it keeps. Cheese, bacon, etc. It's the cholesterol and the fat and the animals, etc. That's the problem. Now, we are designed as salt seekers. If you remember your high school biology, on the tip of your tongue is a drive for sodium, for salt, for minerals. That was not a mistake. You must get these minerals in, and there were a variety of minerals in the past, but there was also salt. You must get these minerals in to stay alive. So you're designed to take in a certain amount of minerals. As far as a therapy of lowering sodium to help people, it doesn't do much. If you cut your sodium intake from 1,750 milligrams down to 2,300 milligrams, which is what is the standard recommendation, you lower the blood pressure, the top number by 3 millimeters of mercury and the bottom number by 0.6 of a millimeter of mercury. Hardly anything. The way you get tremendous drops in blood pressure and tremendous improvements in health is you go to the extremes, like the Kempner program, the rice diet, where Walter Kempner used to wash the rice to get the salt off. But I would argue, again, that it wasn't the low sodium nature of the Kempner diet. It was fewer than 500 milligrams a day. It was the fact that it was a diet based on rice and fruits and a few vegetables. So, you need a certain amount of sodium, certainly, well, you need a certain amount. You need more than 500 milligrams a day. It'd be nice. 50 will kill you if you have less than 50. Salt tastes good. That's the other thing that I want to point out as to why I wouldn't pick on salt so much. Remember, it's the pig, not the bacon. The reason is that that's what people love. They love the salt. If people come to our 12-day telemedicine program, which we run every month or two, if they don't like the food, what I tell them is take the salt shaker and put the salt on the food. You'll love it. But see, we put salt only on the surface of the food. We never use it in cooking because we want the tongue to taste it to get maximum enjoyment with, let's just say we want to cover all bases. The people who get hurt by high sodium are people with extreme heart failure, extreme kidney failure, a few people with extreme edema problems. But otherwise, it's the pig.
Okay. If you could access any 10 data points, including results from any medical test, detailed information on an individual's diet or exercise habits, levels of any mineral or vitamin, cholesterol levels, blood sugar levels, salt intake, etc. Which would you choose as the most crucial to predict which among a group of 1,000 40-year-olds are likely to maintain good health until 95 years old?
Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I thought, like I say, I get a little carried away sometimes.
Got it. So,
I'll
It's
give you a
hard
short
just-
answer for this.
alrighty. It's wow. It's like you're giving us all these choices. So one test that I find from studies is associated with longevity is a test called the VO2 max, where you have a patient exercise, and it's kind of a technical term, but it measures the efficiency of the human body as basically an engine in terms of extracting oxygen and producing carbon dioxide and energy, and what is the maximum level of energy. And so it's basically an exercise test. So people in the top 10 percentile of VO2 max, that's associated with much longer survival. Another test I would like to look at to measure longevity would be hemoglobin A1C. And then the third, hemoglobin A1C looks at the long-term over the last 3 months, their glucose control. And we know that people with increased glucose blood sugar levels often have insulin resistance, which again is associated with chronic diseases and early death. And let's see, picking one more test associated with longevity, I would look at blood pressure, because we know that people with high blood pressure unfortunately often die prematurely. So I would choose these three tests: the VO2 max exercise test, the hemoglobin A1C, and people's blood pressure.
Thank you.
I think all of those are valid, but there's only one test I consider always to turn out to be highly predictive, and that's compliance. In other words, how well a participant adheres to the diet. I don't care what happens to their cholesterol. I really don't even care what happens to their blood pressure. It's how well they stick with the program. And Dean Ornish has shown that, for example, when he saw reversal of atherosclerosis, there was no correlation with cholesterol. It was adherence, compliance with the program. That's the only factor. I mean, if you had to narrow it down what you're asking me to do, that's what I would choose, is compliance to the program. Now, Steve, I hate to interrupt here, but I saw down in the chat, somebody said that Dr. McDougall took vaccinations. Let's make sure we cover that during this session, okay? I want to deal with that.
Okay. Okay. What specific advice do you have for patients looking to lower their blood sugar to below 100 or below 90?
You're asking what can people do to lower their blood sugar?
What specific advice would you say to someone who's trying to get their blood sugar below 100 or possibly even below 90? What would be your specific advice?
Well, first of all, I would take a step back and look at nuance, because I think what you might be referring to is their fasting blood sugar.
Yes.
Yeah, because obviously if I eat a potato right now, my blood sugar is going to go up above 90 or 100, which is normal. Insulin's going to come out and bring it down. So the things that people can do to lower their fasting blood glucose or blood sugar is to focus on lowering levels of inflammation. One way they can do that is to decrease the amount of visceral fat, which is the amount of fat around their body. And I would add the percentage of visceral fat is one of those other tests that I think correlates with long-term survival. You want to bring your visceral fat levels low. It turns out that the visceral fat, the fat that surrounds the internal organs, like the heart and the liver, is a very pro-inflammatory, metabolically active tissue that can cause increased fasting blood sugar. And there's no magic drug that's going to quickly take it away. It's by eating the right diet, by getting exercise and getting the appropriate sleep, basically having a correct lifestyle. All those things can lower your visceral fat levels, which in turn will lower your fasting glucose levels.
Okay, I'll make it simple for you. Lose weight. Okay, type 2 diabetes is 100% curable by losing weight. All right, you can go on the Atkins diet. You can take semaglutides, the new shots used for weight loss. I can lock you up in prison. I can wire your teeth together. I can put you on the McDougall diet. Regardless, if you lose weight, you'll cure type 2 diabetes 100% of the time. If you have type 2 diabetes, if you have type 1 diabetes, you must have insulin. Losing weight following a good diet will help you in tremendous ways, even if you're a type 1 diabetic. And then there's something in between. I call it type 1.5 diabetes. In that case, losing weight may correct it, but it may not. And you might need a little insulin to correct some of the problems. So I can make your blood sugar 15 if I want. I'm a doctor. I have pills and shots, and to do it, look, you're not going to cure a type 1 diabetic with any diet. They have to take insulin. Type 2, you cure all the time with weight loss. So that's how you do it. And a good diet is important in every aspect of diabetes or in good health. So don't think I'm overlooking that very fundamental thing, because I'm not.
In terms of cancer prevention, what specific dietary or lifestyle recommendations do you make?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Preventing cancer is similar to the other chronic diseases we've been talking about. Specifically, you want to avoid processed foods. You want to avoid toxins like aluminum and heavy metals. You want to make sure you're exercising. And yeah, so specifically, I would stay away from animal products. I would make sure you're exercising. I would make sure that you limit your being overweight or your visceral fat, because those are associated, being overweight is associated with higher risk of developing cancer. So yeah, cancer as a chronic disease is no different in terms of the prevention, eating the right foods, lots of plants, avoid animal products, and try to lose weight if you happen to be overweight or obese.
I would say don't smoke. And don't catch certain viruses, because there are lots of viruses out there that cause cancer. And avoid environmental pollutants, because I think most of our cancers are initiated by industry and the pollutants that it provides. And then what happens is people become overweight, which promotes cancer. They develop high estrogen levels in their body, which promotes breast and uterine cancer, by eating the Western diet. So clearly, the best diet for preventing, as Dr. Helman said, because of the chemical accumulation as you go up on the food chain. All right, that's how you get most of these carcinogenic chemicals, is when you eat at the top of the food chain, which Dr. Helman was just telling us about. So diet helps you in many ways. But I want to add one more thing, is diet is even helpful when it's not a cancer that is obviously due to diet. Like, for example, when it comes to lung cancer, in Japan, 60% of the males smoke, far more than males in this country. Yet in Japan, they have a much lower incidence of lung cancer, even though they smoke more. Why? Because they eat a diet that allows them to defend and repair better than we can. So diet influences smoking cancers, skin cancer. An article published in 1992 in the New England Journal of Medicine. They looked at people who had skin cancers, actinic keratoses. And what they did is they put them on a low-fat diet. They reduced the recurrence of actinic keratoses by 2 to 6 times. So a good diet's going to help you from every aspect of cancer. Viruses, toxins from smoke, sun damage, all kinds of things that you've worked really hard at avoiding, which you should still avoid. But you've got to have diet as a fundamental way to not only prevent, but after you get cancer, you will live longer if you eat well. February 13th, 2015, you look it up. The American Cancer Society came out and told doctors, February 13th, 2015, told doctors that you should be prescribing a healthy diet in the direction we're talking about, condemned meats, etc., eat more plants, etc. They said, the American Cancer Society said, you should eat that diet. Doctors should tell patients to eat that diet after they got cancer. But of course, it's been 9 years, they haven't done it, as far as I know. So, it's not only prevention, but it's treatment. And I believe you can change the course of cancer by being healthy. I mean, not everybody dies in 2 years. Some people live 20 years. Why? Why? Well, I would think a sick person would be more likely to die in 2 years, and a healthy person would be more likely to live 20 years, wouldn't you think? I do. I do.
Fasting at the True North Health Center, what types of fasting do you recommend, and what are the health benefits associated with them? Specifically, are you recommending fasting for intermediate fast, just fasting from dinner till breakfast? Are you recommending a 3-week fast at True North Health? Are you recommending a week fast, a 3-day fast, a juice fast, a water fast? What is the specific recommendations you're recommending on fasting?
Yeah, so my perspective on fasting is that fasting is similar to exercise in that the more you do it, the better you get at it. And also interesting, biochemically, the changes in your body when you fast are almost identical to when you exercise. So wherever you are, I think it makes sense to consider fasting. So if that means if you've never fasted before, try some intermittent fasting. Limit the hours of the day that you eat to maybe 12 or 8 hours. Skip breakfast. Now, if you've got a chronic disease that you're trying to reverse, or you're trying to lose weight, sure, try Dr. McDougall's program. But we would definitely have some patients at True North who unfortunately failed Dr. McDougall's program and got sentenced to fasting at True North. So at True North, the ideal was water fasting, but some of the patients were so sick, you have to be off most medications to water fast. But I think one of the key things is if you're going to water or juice fast, it's best to do it under medical supervision. Now, I've seen people do it on their own, but it's risky, especially the refeeding portion. So in general, when it comes to fasting, I'm a big fan. There are many different types. And I would say start with the type that resonates with you.
Thank you.
I'm a longtime friends with Dr. Alan Goldhammer and True North. And so you'll hear nothing but positive things for me to say. Water fast is the ultimate elimination diet. No cholesterol, no fat, no toxins. And it's the ultimate elimination. Now, whether or not it helps, once you get these toxins out of the system, whether or not the body's more efficient at healing is something that the fasting people believe to be true. I send people from my program to True North under 2 circumstances. One, and it's usually an autoimmune disease. That's usually what we're dealing with. I will send somebody over it, and believe me, it only happens maybe once every couple of years, so it doesn't happen very often. And the second reason that I would send them over is if they won't follow the McDougall diet. After 10 days of just water, you know, the McDougall diet is a palace. It's the best buffet in town. So if you need any motivation to change what you eat, go water fast for a couple of weeks. Dr. Alan Goldhammer will beat it into you. And by the way, at True North, they serve they teach the McDougall diet without salt and sugar. We include salt and sugar on the surface of the food for the reasons I told you. I want them to eat the food. I want them to like the food. They like salt and sugar. So we put it in small amounts on the surface of the food. You know that Mary Poppins saying? You know what they said in Mary Poppins, right? Okay. A little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down. Well, that's what we do.
Is it advisable to limit or reduce the intake of whole plant foods rich in saturated fats, such as Brazil nuts, macadamia nuts, coconut products, cacao butter, to maintain a healthy diet? And are these foods potentially harmful to our heart health?
Yeah, my answer is yes. You want to limit your saturated fat intake, even if it's from plant sources. And, you know, with one exception that I can think of, and again, it's rare, but if you have a patient who is underweight and you're trying to put weight on them quickly, yeah, I could see a role maybe for a limited amount of saturated fat. The problem is from the studies, if you have large amounts of saturated fat in your diet, what happens is you're going to have damage to your blood vessels, even if that saturated fat is from plant source like coconuts. So in studies that have looked at the blood vessels of people on tropical islands where half of their diet is from coconuts, unfortunately, there's damage from the saturated fat from the coconut to the blood vessels. So in general, you want to avoid saturated fat intake, including from plant sources like coconut.
Well, you'll have to share those studies with me on Polynesians having high atherosclerosis, because that's not what I found. But anyway, going on, you know, they put nuts in hard shells for a reason. And the coconut is the hardest shell of any nut I know of. Maybe it's because nature intended it to be near impossible to get these unless you're starving to death and very desperate. I don't think these things have a major impact, not only because they're infrequently consumed, but I don't think they're, well, I know animal saturated fats are much more toxic than plant saturated fats. So, you know, they're 90% fat. They'll make you fat. Whether they give you heart disease or not, I have my doubts.
What exactly are each of you recommending that we eat for dinner tomorrow night? Assume we're willing to listen to you. Our goal is to be healthy. Or what are you recommending we have for dinner tomorrow? And what exactly is the food that's in your program?
Let's start with you, Dr. McDougall.
Okay. Sweet potatoes.
Yeah. And for me, sweet potatoes.
I just said sweet potatoes. Aren't you going to argue with me? You don't get enough protein. You don't get enough vitamins, fat. I'm sorry. I'm not done yet, Dr. Helman. I just wanted to pause to make sure they understood that I only said live on sweet potatoes and water, because I run into a situation where people who are really sick, they come to my 12-day internet-based program, and they're occupied in some other way with some other thing. And they don't appreciate all the instruction we give them on food preparation. And they miss the fact that we have over 4,000 recipes with great variety available for them. And they get to the end of the program and they say to me, Dr. McDougall, I really don't know what to eat. And I'm dying. You know, what should I do? I say to them, go home and eat sweet potatoes until you figure it out. Because you can live for 10, 20 years on sweet potatoes alone. They've got everything you need except for B12, which we may or may not get into. So, you know, I don't know. I would say my favorite foods are potatoes. It's just my preference. They're the most satisfying, enjoyable food. If I personally had one food to eat the rest of my life, it would be potatoes. But sweet potatoes have some advantages over potatoes, but not much. Hey, you're not going to miss. Look, you can consume underground storage organs. You know what I mean by that? They grow underground. You know, potatoes, sweet potatoes, bulbs, corms, roots. They grow underground. They've got everything, including vitamin A and vitamin C. Okay, beta carotene. Above ground storage organs, you know what that means? They grow above the ground, like seeds, like grains and legumes. They're missing vitamin A and C. So you have to add a little bit of fruit or a little bit of vegetable to get the A and C. You don't have to do that for underground storage organs, but above ground you do. So if you decide you don't like potatoes and you're willing to live on rice alone with maybe a slice of orange a day or a flower and a broccoli a day to get the A and C, that'd be okay too. But we've got 4,000 different recipes. And we're on Instagram. There's probably another 10,000 recipes on Instagram in our following. So you know, you don't have to just live on sweet potatoes, but you can with great success, with no deficiencies. Can't live on water alone though, can you?
Yeah. So my recommendation is eat what you love. And I personally love sweet potatoes. So, you know, tomorrow night, have some sweet potatoes. If you like beans and rice, go eat some beans and rice. If you want to have a salad for dinner, eat a salad that has lots of different colors to it, you know, including some kale and some cabbage. And so there is no one magic food, although sweet potatoes are amazing. There is no one magic food. And I think the key is eat what you love and also what happens to be available.
Dr. Helman, I'd like to clarify something here because I think it's really important for our listeners to hear this. You cannot live on non-starchy green and yellow vegetables. The people who recommend this are called nutritarians. And they tell you you live on kale and broccoli. You will starve to death. You will never be happy. You'll never be satisfied. You'll never succeed. You have to have that starch in the center of your diet. 90% of your food should be starch. And then the rest, green and yellow, non-starchy vegetables. But too often people hear, oh, I'm going to be a vegetarian. I'm going to be a vegan. That means I got to live on lettuce and celery. Well, excuse me, you're not going to live on lettuce and celery. It doesn't sound like something I would want to do. But if somebody said, hey, you get to live on pasta with marinara sauce or Mexican food, bean burritos and rice and salsa, you know, or mushu vegetables over rice. Hey, you're talking my language, man. And I can also get satisfied. I can get the calories I need to run a race, for my daughter to have a baby or granddaughter now. I'm getting so old. Anyway, I think it's important people understand you cannot live on a diet of non-starchy green and yellow vegetables successfully.
Right.
You got to have that starch.
I agree. Those vegetables have a very low calorie density. Now, I've definitely seen people who, you know, live on basically a fruitarian diet. You know, if they happen to live in the tropics and, you know, they have lots of mangoes and other fruits. But the key is to eat what you love and what you have available. But I agree, if you're going to try to live on iceberg lettuce, it's going to be a very difficult path for you.
Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. Go ahead, Dr. McDougall.
You want me to ask a question?
No. I'm just saying the audience, if they would like to ask a question, they could raise their hand.
Oh.
So just to clarify, when you say to eat starches, do you mean beans, whole grains, potatoes, rice? Well, what is a starch? Name all the starches.
Well, there are probably, I could find 1,000 different starches out there for you if I look back through history. The common starches today are beans, corn, rice, potatoes, wheat. I mean, that's what most of the world eats, are those 4 or 5 starches. the bulk of the people still who live on planet Earth live on starch primarily, but that's changing rapidly. Over the last 20 years, we've become a planet of overnutrition rather than a planet of undernutrition. That's just happened the last 20 years. And you see it in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East. I mean, good grief, how many times do you turn on the news and see obese politicians and rich people, huh? And it's turning out that the middle class and the lower class, particularly in our country where rich foods are free, it's do you know in the United States, the most recent paper I have shows that 91% of people are too fat for their health. That means basically everybody's sick. I mean, they're on the verge of having a massive heart attack, of finding a metastatic breast cancer, of developing kidney failure from diabetes. I mean, the common person walking down the street, they're sick. And you have to ask some really basic questions. When that many people are sick, you have to say, well, is there some kind of serious genetic problem? Of course not. It has to be something that we do in mass. It's the food. It's the food. Stop looking other places. It's the food. And if you eat a starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables, you will take care of most of your health problems because most of them are due to food poisoning. Food poisons. I want to end my discussion here. It's hard for people to change. And I've worked the last 47 years to try and figure out how to get people to change. I've had nationwide radio and TV shows, written 13 national best-selling books. I've been at this intently. 3 different kinds of programs, residential and now a telemedicine program. And that's what I spend my time trying to do, is to get people to change. The first book we ever wrote was called Making the Change, because we knew change was the problem. So I try and simplify things for people. When it comes to destructive habits, like, for example, when it comes to problems with smoking, you've got only one poison to deal with. That's tobacco. Okay, so you got only one thing to change, and that's the inhalation of products of cigarette smoke. When it comes to alcoholism, you've got only one thing to change. There's only one other liquid you can drink besides alcohol. But when it comes to food, you've got everything from avocados to zebras that you can eat. And people get confused. And so what I've tried to do is make it simple for people. And so what I explain to them, like with smoking, there's one toxin. And with alcohol, there's one toxin. Well, with food, there are 2 categories of poisons. The first category is anything from an animal. That means any animal body parts or any animal secretions. And the second thing is free oil. In other words, corn oil, safflower oil, olive oil, etc. oil. So all you have to do is, like cigarettes, it's just one thing. Alcohol is just one thing. You only got 2 things to change when it comes to food. But I know some of you out there are thinking, oh, animal foods and oil, that's all I eat. That's all I know. Well, that's all you know until you learn about starch. And then all of a sudden the whole world opens to you. And so I've tried to make it real simple for people so that they can make effective changes. It's not overwhelming. 2 food poisons. That's it. Fix them.
Amen. And let me just say, when we talk about people who are overweight or obese or fat, we're not trying to fat shame. We know just from our clinical experience that people who are overweight or obese age prematurely. They get all these chronic diseases. And the key way to reverse that is your food. As Dr. McDougall said, oil is not a health food. You definitely want to cut it out. It's a poison.
Dr. Helman.
I kind of smile when you say about fat shaming. I have a slide that I show. In fact, I'll be showing it during my next presentation next Friday. And it starts out by listing the different words that are used to describe somebody. I don't know what word to use. Overweight, fat, obese. I listed every word I could think of to describe this condition. I didn't find anything flattering. Should I call you roly-poly? Should I call you chubby? Should I call you broad in the butt? What should I call you? Nothing. Can't think of any word that comes out making me feel good. They all have a negative connotation associated with them. And that can only be because there is nothing good about being fat. Fat, by the way, is an adjective. Okay. Obesity is a disease. And overweight means there's a standard of an ideal weight that you're balancing against. So there are proper definitions for these terms. Fat's an adjective, obesity is a disease, and overweight refers to a standard that you're not meeting. Every other term, you find me a term. I'll be on next Friday night. Find me a term that is flattering to people who are fat, obese, overweight, roly-poly, chubby. I can't find any nice words.
Dr. Helman, this conference I started like 11 years ago. And I started with Brian Clements. He was the first time we ever did it. It was just him for 3 days. And he's a friend of mine, and I've worked closely with him. Hippocrates has been a good friend of the real truth about health. But one thing that Brian says differently, it's only like him, Anna Maria, and Gabriel Cousins, and Thomas Seyfried. They claim that when they used to look at blood under the microscope at Hippocrates, they observed tumor growth in patients who consumed large amounts of fruit. And this observation led them to reconsider the role of fruit in their dietary recommendations. And he says that the modern fruit's been hybridized to increase its sweetness, and that the high sugar fruit content can lead to elevated blood sugar levels, which could be detrimental to individuals' conditions like cancer, where sugar can feed tumor growth. And so he's basically saying that if you have any kind of health issue, you should avoid sugar, otherwise no more than 15% of one's diet by weight. And then Thomas Seyfried at Boston College is saying that glutamine and glucose are the two things that feed cancer. So, in general, most whole food plant-based people are super positive about fruit. But I've asked this question many times to Brian, Anna Maria, Gabriel, and Thomas Seyfried, saying that glutamine and glucose are the fuels of cancer. There's nothing in the world I want more than to eat blueberries, cherries, peaches, plums, nectarines. It's one of the joys of life. Yet, if you're going to feed cancer, that would be bad. Do you have any clear insights on his perspective?
So first of all,
Yeah,
Dr. Helman, do you remember glutamine as being a sugar? Isn't glutamine an amino acid?
It's an amino acid that
I don't know how you mix up glucose and glutamine.
They're two
I don't
separate
see any
things.
connection at all.
They start with the same three letters, GLU.
They start with
Glucose
G.
and
So I guess we could put God in the category, or goose. They have no connection. Look, the research shows that eating sugar does not, except immediately, does not raise blood sugar chronically. Even after 2 days, it doesn't. Sugar rots your teeth. It's empty calories. It'll raise triglycerides in sensitive people. It's not health food, okay? But it's not the two major food poisons that I just gave to you. It's minor food poison, just like salt is. You got to deal with the most important things to get on with to get your health back. You can't go off on tangents that are relatively unimportant.
Right. No, I agree with you, Dr. McDougall. But first of all, I want to say, Steve, thank you for starting this conference 11 years ago. I remember going in person when this was in person in Orlando, and I lived in Orlando, Florida. And I remember commuting to the conference. I learned so much as a traditional physician. That's how I ended up going into more of an integrative approach. So you personally setting up this conference transformed my professional life. So that's number one. Number two, there's a nuance here. Here's the nuance. Number one is that it is true that, it is true that the fruits of today have been hybridized and modified in terms of having a higher sugar content than 100 years ago, right? The apples of today are huge. The common apples of 100 years ago were tiny. That part is true. But if we talk about cancer, Now, there are certain types of early cancers that get stimulated growth by a high sugar diet. And when I say a high sugar diet, I mean things like processed sugars, not whole fruits, not blueberries, but maybe, you know, blueberry jelly preserves with lots of added sugar. So what I would say is, so that's certain types of early cancers can be promoted by increased sugar, but when you get to stage 3 or stage 4 cancers, often their preferred fuel is not sugar, it's fat. So I think what you were in your question, it's not the whole picture, it's not the whole nuance. So no, Steve, you should not, and the audience should not be afraid about eating fruit and blueberries and strawberries and bananas and apples. That should not be your concern. Your concern is you should be avoiding added sugar. Added sugar is not your friend. So yeah, that's my perspective.
Okay.
Well, you know, this whole sugar thing has got a promotion because of the low carbers, the ketos, the carnivore diet people. They bastardize sugar because, of course, they have a program that makes you so sick you don't eat, and as a result, you lose weight. But this kind of approach increases your risk of dying of heart disease. I can show you 4 large meta-analyses studies that have come to the conclusion that eating a low-carb diet increases your risk of dying overall and dying of heart disease. I could show you a study that just came out. And in fact, Dr. Mercola, who I think you referred to just a minute ago, he changed his own personal diet as a consequence of this study published this year, which shows that people in my age group and Dr. Helman's age group, he's middle age, I'm old age. In our age groups, you increase your risk of cancer and heart disease and overall death by eating these low carb diets. And that stimulated, as I understand it, Mercola to change his diet from keto to a diet similar to what we're talking about. So, you know, they've done a bad thing to people. They're not just to people, but to the planet and also to animal welfare. Get rid of these folks. But the meat and dairy industry and egg industry are really happy with them.
Okay, I want to thank you both very much. If we could unmute the microphone so the audience can thank them.
There's something wrong.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you. We love you. And so what is this?
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank
you.
Appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you,
Dr.
guys.
Helman
Thank you.
and Dr. McDougall, how does someone get in touch with you? What's the best way? Dr. Helman first.
For me, probably my website, which is drjosh.com, and my email address is drjosh@drjosh.com. Thanks.
Do you do private consultations to telemedicine?
I do, and just go to my website, drjosh.com, drjosh.com.
Okay, it's on our website also. Dr. McDougall, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, we're on all the social media, you know, Instagram and Facebook and so on. But we have a website. It's drmcdougall.com. And plus, we're very, very well represented on YouTube. So if you want to hear a discussion, you know, about the things we talked about today, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and so on, I've got probably 200 lectures up there on various topics. So you just go to YouTube and put in McDougall and diabetes, arthritis, or et cetera. And you'll get a good free understanding. And by the way, on our website, drmcdougall.com, we offer a 12-day free program. No gimmicks. You can do the program. Everything's there for you on your own for nothing. drmcdougall.com.
Thank you both very much.